It's another week launched. Kind of forgot what I was going to say there. Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Sublime Text Live, where we're going to be chatting about Sublime Text and answering questions and the such. Hello, Iatku. How is your day going? I was just clicking on over to the comments that I haven't responded to yet on the YouTube channel, which for some reason there are none of, even though I have several notifications, which is unfortunate because YouTube really makes it tricky sometimes to track actual messages. And related to that, you might notice the whitewash on my face because for some reason there's no such thing as dark mode in the YouTube studio. There's only light mode, burning out my retinas. Joe Behiko, or Joe Behiko, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. In any case, hello, welcome to tonight's stream. It is shaping up to be a not entirely terrible week as these things go. Of course, we are only on Tuesday, but nevertheless. Takashi's son, hello, welcome. Ooh, that's a fun emote. Just getting started here and looking, because one of the things I was going to cover is there were some questions that people were asking in comments, but for some reason they're not showing up in the YouTube studio, so that's kind of weird. YouTube really makes it tricky to do this sort of stuff. Impending doom of a Spanish final. Hola is Spanish, right? That might be the only Spanish that I know. I know that it's sort of a weird turn of events, as I understand it. I'm Canadian, and on Sesame Street, growing up, the two languages that we heard were French and English. But my wife, who's American, her experience with Sesame Street was mostly French and Spanish. So, sort of a fun little, Canada is officially a bilingual country, and I think Spanish is as close to a second language in the States as it gets, I think, from what I've heard, but it's not official. Sometimes I can barely speak English when it comes to that sort of thing. Pardon me. We'll see how well that works tonight. Yeah, I think. Well, there were questions here. That one was less a question and more of a comment, so maybe we don't need to worry about that one. Someone has thoughts about what I could do on the channel, which is something that we should totally and can totally discuss on the stream tonight, related to content on the channel and how it might be hard to find, and all of the thumbnails on the channel are the same but with different text, and that's on purpose because it's kind of a brand that I've come up with. But the point made was that no one would know. Once you know the content on the channel is behind those thumbnails, then you know to click on it, but other than that you don't. And I have thought in the past, in fact I'm currently on version 2 of what my thumbnails look like, but by the same token, I think anybody that's interested in the topic that I cover on the channel would do a search, and then you would see those hits. Most of the titles, unless this is the last time I looked, most titles that show up for videos when I do a search have similar thumbnails to my own. Ooh, Tira asked a question, and then, how can I move my Sublime Text settings and all the package settings to another Mac? Oh, well, we can push the button and discuss this very thing. And can we execute Sublime Text specific commands like toggle sidebar from a Sublime build file? Some commands you can execute that way. Some commands you can't without a little bit of plug-in work. But we can cover both of those things. The first thing is, how can you move your Sublime Text settings and all other package settings to another Mac? How you do this is not really platform specific. It would work the same under Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. I'm currently using Linux right now, although I have a Mac right there and a Windows machine over there. But it all comes down to you choosing Preferences, Browse Packages, which is probably going to take a while because I have some network shares on a drive that is behind me that has to slowly spool up before the window will actually appear. There we go. Now what this does is whatever platform you're on, it's going to open the appropriate file manager. So on Windows, this would be the File Explorer. Under Mac OS, this would be the Finder. Here under Linux, it's the file manager application for my particular item. All of your user settings and configurations and everything are stored inside of this package named user and inside of this folder. And the most important parts of those are these. If we were to use, pardon me, from the menu, if you did preferences, package settings, package control settings, you get this window. One of the things that's listed in here is installed packages, which is the list of all of the packages that you've told package control that you would like to install. And over here on this side, there are some extra settings. These are the default settings for package control. One of them is install missing. If it's missing packages, should be automatically installed when Sublime Text first starts. So if you were to take the entire this user package and all of its contents and copy it from one Mac to another. So what you would have to do is install Sublime on the second Mac, then use this command to open up the user folder, and then from the existing Mac, copy all those files into here. When you restart Sublime, install package control if it's not already installed. Install missing will tell it that it needs to install all of these packages that you have installed, which it will slowly do until all of them are installed. And because all of the configuration for everything is also stored in here, we can see things like the outliner package is in here. My user preferences are in here. The package control preferences are in here. Your key bindings are in here, etc. That should automatically bring you pretty much where you'd like to go. And for more instructions on that, if we go to packagecontrol.io and look under docs, and there's this item on syncing. This also outlines this as well. If you go here, basically the same sort of thing. And if you wanted to, you could also sync this using Git. That's something that I do, or using Dropbox. There's various files you probably don't want to sync across. Doesn't hurt if you do. Package control will just recreate them. But these are files that package control uses to track its own information. And Ayush, hello and welcome. Now, the second question was, can you execute Sublime Text specific commands like toggle sidebar from a Sublime build file? And yes, you can do something like that. Let's go ahead and close this. This comes down to whether or not the command is a window command, a text command, or an application command. That's something that we've covered previously on videos in the channel. If you happen to watch the Plugin 101 item, I'm not sure if that counts as one, but it's easy enough to check. We can add folder to this window and add the user package. So my user package appears over there, right? So if I toggle the sidebar, opens and closes, we can say new build system. And one of the things that you can do in a build system is this key named target. And if you specify that, you're telling the build that instead of doing what it would normally do, which is run some external program, it should run a different command to run that build instead. You could put the name of a command in here, like toggle sidebar, for example, and save that as something. Let's say we'll call this one toggle.sublime build. You could put as much stuff in here as you want. Now, if I was to go into this thing and choose toggle as a build system, then when I run the build, the sidebar opens and closes because it's executing that command. That's the only thing it's doing, mind you, is that. It's not doing anything else. But if that's what you wanted, if you wanted to execute an arbitrary command, you could indeed do that. If you happen to use Terminus to execute builds, then one of the keys that you can put in there is post window hooks or pre-window hooks. That's basically the same sort of thing. You can specify a list of commands to execute before the build runs or after, where you could include commands just like this. Did you have something specific in mind that you'd like to do from something like this? generally speaking, you probably want to run an extra command and also still run a build of some sort, which would require a little bit of plugin code, but would otherwise be entirely possible. You can't add multiple commands. No, if you want to do something like that, here's something we can try, because I've never tried this before, but if you're using Sublime Text 4, it has built-in functionality for the chain of command and multi-commands packages, which would be, let's go over to here and say this. Chain of command, there's this package here, and then there's also multi-commands, which is this one. Both of these things do the exact same thing. They allow you to execute multiple commands from one specific key binding if you wanted to do something like that. Now, if you're using Sublime Text 4, you don't need either of these packages, because what we're about to do here will work just fine, because this is now built into Sublime Text 4. If you are not using Sublime Text 4, if you're still using Sublime Text 3, then to do something like this, you would need this chain of command plugin here instead. Just for temporary sake here, I need to look at a file here because I have an example of this. I'm just going to juke that over here real quick. Now, in a build system, target is the name of the command that you want to execute, and that would be, say, chain, for example. And then you need to provide this the arguments that you would like it to get, which would be something named commands, like this, which is going to be a list, because you can specify one or more things. And then let's copy this one in, because that's a nice, easy sample of stuff to do. So this is going to run two commands, the echo command, which is built in with an argument of chain true, and the same thing with an argument of chain false. So what you could do, in theory, let's see, if we choose build, if you look in the console, it says chain true, chain false. That's this command executing. Every time I run the build, it does that. So using this, you could, in fact, if you wanted to, run extra commands, multiple commands. Of course, if you're doing something like this, you could just create a key binding for it as well. That build system is the same as this key binding, for example. So the utility of that may or may not be that great. Let's see, I want a folder of my plugins, and in the user package, it's not able to configure that a folder in the user package is a plugin file. The only thing that can be a plugin is a file that's directly in the root of a package, which again is the user package. So any of the Python files that you can see here, like giant cursor on multi-select or xtel highlight or plugin completions or pattern navigate, those are plugins. Any files that exist anywhere in any other files in here, like if there was a plugin file in here, that's not a plugin, that's just a Python file. There's not a way to configure Sublime to choose another folder. You just need to put it in the root of a package. It's technically possible if you want to have stuff inside of a folder inside of a package, but that's more work on your end to set that up. It shouldn't execute all of the commands in parallel. It should execute them one after the other. Certainly, if you were to look at, well, we'll leave that open there. Let's check. If you look at the source code for a chain of command, for example, which is, again, something that's built into Sublime, but it behaves in exactly the same way. And it's probably worth pointing out that the chain command that's built into Sublime Text 4 works the same as chain of command and the same as multi-commands, except that the command is always chain, because the difference between the two of them is how you specify the commands. But the code for this, and this is why this is now built in, is just 10 lines of code, and you can see it's executing them one after the other. When you call run command, the next command can't finish running until the next one starts. So at least for chain of command, it should execute them one after the other. What you might run into is the notion of a command that starts something and then it finishes later, like a build, for example. When you start a build, you use the exec command. The exec command will start executing right now, and now the build is running in the background, and the command will, this call here, this run command, would come back and say, okay, what next? Because the thing is running in the background. You need to do extra work if you want to sequence commands that start a task running and then sync up with them again later. Is the idea that you're trying to execute multiple external programs, one after the other. Just while we're discussing that, to answer your question there, Ayush, here's an example of something that you could do. If I was to go to I'm in the user packages folder here, right? If I made a folder called plugins and looked inside of it, oops, like this. Let's close all of these files. We'll move that one over there for the time being. Now, if I was to touch a file here named sample.py like this, I could say import Sublime, Sublime, ha ha ha, import Sublime plugin. I am not having a good typing day today. And then we could say def. We don't want to do that. Let's say this. Print, I am the sample plugin inside of a subfolder, like this. Now, if I save this inside of the particular thing there, if I name it inside of here, save this as sample.py, like this. Every time I save this, you don't see nothing in the console. That's because this isn't considered to be a plugin, right? You might think it's a plugin, but it's not. It's just a Python file. Only plugin files that are in the very root of a package in the top level are considered to be plugin files. Otherwise, basically because the system wants you to be able to control, much like we do here with these imports, what extra code gets pulled in. And you might have different things you want to pull in if your package is running on Mac OS or Linux or Windows. You might have 3 different implementations of the same thing with 3 slightly different ways to do it because of 3 different platforms. You don't want those to just all load because that might cause problems. You want to have control over which one that gets loaded. So what you could actually do in that particular case is say you want to create a new plugin, and you would say from.plugin, what did I name that directory? I named the directory plugins and the file is sample.py. So from plugins.sample import and then say the name of some command. So we could say do class sample command as the Sublime plugin dot text command, right? That has a run method that takes an edit and then does self.view.insert, and let's see, that's going to go edit point text. So it's going to be edit 0 hi, like this. And again, when I save that, does this think this is a plugin? No. But if I was to come over here and say from.plugin sample import sample command, like this, we'll delete this one. Actually, I could have just copied and pasted that, couldn't I? If I save this as other.py, well, that says it's reloaded, and notice that it said I'm the sample plugin inside of a subfolder, which means it loaded this, which means if I was inside of this thing, I could say view run command sample, and it'll insert the text hi up into the top. The reason why this is considered to be an advanced topic and not something that I would recommend unless you're very familiar with Python on the whole is watch this. I save this file again. It says it reloaded the plugin. Didn't say this. So if I was to change this to this is the most unexpected turn of events, like this, save this file. This file is now updated. Come over here, save this one. I run this command. It inserts hi. Did it insert this is the most unexpected turn of events? No, it did not. You might have expected it to, but it doesn't. The only way to get that to work is to quit Sublime and restart it. Now, once it's restarted, if you run the command, this is the most unexpected turn of events. So the lesson being that the Python interpreter caches modules that are imported. So while this is technically possible, you need to make sure that you know what you're doing there. Otherwise, things are going to go all pear-shaped on you. Now, the other question there was, yes, you want to execute multiple commands. Well, the simplistic way to do something like that, let's delete this file, and we'll delete this file as well. To say, well, this sample toggle command here, simplistically speaking, if you don't put the target in there or any of this stuff, and you just had a build, then you could say shell command echo 1 and, echo 1, echo 2, like this. And then when you run the build, it's running 2 commands, one right after the other. Depending on what you want to do, that's probably the easiest way to do something like that. You can also use 2 ampersands, in which case it only runs the second one if the first one fails. If you're trying to run a very complex sequence of applications, then this could potentially get a little bit unwieldy. In that case, it can help sometimes to do something like command instead. When you run command, you pass it a list of things instead of one string. Shell command simulates you typing something directly into the command interpreter in your shell. Like for example, here, if I'm typing ls here or echo 1, that's exactly what that program is doing. I'm just typing this command in directly. That's what shell command does. Using command is slightly different. It tells the system that instead of pass this to the shell and ask it to do this, it says the item in the first thing, execute that. And the rest of the things are arguments, like so. So we might do something like this. And now it's executing the program named echo and passing it the argument 1. If you wanted to execute multiple things, then you could try to do the same thing. Let's add a comma on that so that's not broken. Let's add that comma a little bit in the correct location so that it'll actually work. Will this actually do what we expect? No, it won't. And the reason for that is when you use command, this is something that the shell understands, the command interpreter. Here, this is bash. If you're on Mac OS, it would be bash or Z shell. On Windows, it's the command prompt or PowerShell or command or whatever you happen to be using. This sequence of and in here is something that when you type it here, echo 1 and echo 2, the system that runs commands sees that and says, you're intending to run this program with this argument and then this program with this argument, and it runs the 2 things. You use command this way, it's saying, this is the program, these are the arguments. So you're telling it to echo the word 1 and echo and 2, and that's why when you execute it, it doesn't do what you want. But you can simulate that. Probably should have put a comment there by saying shell true, like this. And then theoretically, it'll do the thing that you want it to do. Whether or not that actually works is a little bit of an argument to listener. I always tend to prefer the other way of doing that with shell command because it has fewer surprises. Ben, hello, welcome. How is your eventide going? Sorry, your morning etude, your afternoon aside. Anyway, hello. Something else that you can do is, if you want to, you could create a plugin that executes multiple things one after the other by taking advantage of the fact that, if we go back to previous things here, we'll go way, way, way back to here. When I run this, Sublime says finished in 5 milliseconds, unless you're using Sublime Text 3, and then it would measure it in seconds instead. So inherently, it knows how long this took, right? Something we can also do here is say sleep 20. And this really underscores what's happening here, because when I execute this, it says it's building. That command is running. I can still do other stuff. That command, the command that ran the build, is still running. You know, it started something running in the background, and then it was done. But the thing that it actually did will eventually finish. And Sublime can tell that it finishes because it can tell us that it finished. It says it right there. The command that executes this knows when the thing that it started is done. So it's entirely possible to have a custom plugin that just executes the first program and then waits for it to be done and then executes a second one and a third one and so on. There might be a package for that on package control. I've never looked, but by and large, just chaining commands together is usually the easier way to go for something like that. Yeah. That was fun. I think that I have, I don't know where it is. One of the videos on, let's see. Advanced custom target. Possibly this video, if I was to click on it myself after having clicked that link there. Oh, that did not do what I wanted it to do. That's an unfortunate turn of events. Go back. Let's copy that link out of there and paste it over here, shall we? Because that was... It replaced my chat window, guys. That's funky. Okay. This should have a sample plugin that probably does something just like this. Which video was that? 12. It is number 99. We're closing in on 100 of these bad boys, if you can imagine. And at like one a week, that's a lot of weeks of streams. Well, that has an example of how to do something like this. Yes, but that is not the one that I was thinking of. It looks a little something like this. Sorry. Basically, you would want to plug in somewhat similar to this. You would say from default.exec import exec command in addition to the import Sublime and and import. I'm not having a good day. It would look something like this. Now you're creating a command, in this case called execute selection. The important part of this is that this finish gets called when the build is actually finished running, which in this case allows it to remove a temporary file. Make sure you always call the superclass version if you happen to be, into plugins. And once this happens, you know that win or lose, the build did this, because this super.finish call is where this part happens. That would allow you to do another execution of a different command, for example. Indeed, yeah. So that's a good question. The question there is, I've been watching your videos on build systems and projects, and they've been great. Just curious, how do you get so knowledgeable? Just using Sublime all the time? And the answer to that is yes. I discovered Sublime back in 2016. I was coming off of 20 years of using Vim as my main editor, but I was using JetBrains tools to work on some Java and web-based stuff, and I decided I wanted to have a better tool than those because I was having some problems with them. They were a little bit slow. They were a little bit bloated with features that I was never going to use and didn't even understand a lot of them, particularly on the Java side of things, but also in WebStorm as well, because I was doing a lot more simplistic stuff. And there were some bugs in there that were bothering me. I went looking, I found Sublime, and it became the editor. And I've used it for absolutely everything, all of my text editing, with the exception of if I'm in a situation where I'm, on some remote computer and I need to do something, then I would use VI in that situation, or Vim. But otherwise, Sublime for everything. In fact, I've even been known to use Vim from inside of Sublime using the Terminus package. So yeah, it's entirely just a combination of using Sublime for all of my editing and just being very interested in the software as a whole and how it was put together, which is a lot easier to figure now than it used to be, because we have this view package file command that's built in that allows you to look at any of the files that ships directly with Sublime. So for example, just going back to the question that we just talked about here, this is the name of a package, this is the name of a plugin in that package, this is the name of a command, this is the command that executes build systems by default. The exec command is what makes this execute. So if you wanted to know how that works, view package file, default exec, here it is. Here is the Python code for how Sublime is executing external programs. So This would allow you to learn, for example, if you were to look at this, that if you're on Mac OS, then bash is always used to execute a shell command, even if Z shell is your particular shell. And it's just sort of a matter of poking and prodding all of the plugins that shipped and spending a lot of time on the forum. And whenever someone would ask a question, I'd be like, that's a good question. Let's look into that and spend time researching it so I could help them. So that is very much, how I came to the level of knowledge that I have. And I spent a lot of time fiddling around in the exec here and build systems in general. I would imagine the only way to do that is to have either not use it or try updating the driver for the video card that you're using. If you're on Windows, I think in most cases hardware rendering isn't technically needed unless you have a really large monitor, I think, because my recollection is, and I can't remember if this is anecdotal or not, that Windows tends to not perform as well with GPU rendering as everything else, but I may be misremembering that. I don't have any monitors that are large enough for it to matter for me one way or the other. But yeah, apart from that, we know from watching in the Discord that although OpenGL is a standard and it's been around for a very long time, sometimes drivers are kind of spotty about what parts of it they support. Sometimes they tell you that they support a thing specifically when you ask them, hey, can I do this thing? They will say, yes, you can. And then when you do it, they ignore the command or do it in a completely wrong way, which can tend to cause problems. In that case, the only thing you can do is update your driver. Keeping in mind that I am not a GL developer, but that those sorts of questions pop up quite a bit on the Discord, particularly for macOS, because Apple's drivers seem to be worse for various cases. Indeed, yeah. I always, Job there, I always recommend exploration. That is kind of my mantra in life, if you will. Because I've been in software development in an overall capacity for 37 years and only 21, 22 years, somewhere around in there. I'm kind of sketchy on the time I actually started and what time it is right now because the reckonings of those sorts of things are kind of lost on me. I'm not even entirely sure how old I am right now. Well, I guess I'm probably 47. Anyway, all that time that I have been doing stuff, writing software, I've always wanted to know how a thing works. And sometimes the way to determine how a thing works is to dig into it and see if you can find information, do a lot of experimentation. Sometimes the way to find out how a thing works is to try to build one yourself and see if you can replicate how something else works. And that level of curiosity has driven my entire hobby and professional programming career for, the last 37 years. Man, I'm old. So yeah, by always be curious is my motto, which is why at some point I learned how to create applications for Palm Pilot, and I've created applications for Android, and I've created applications for iOS. Those are not things that I do on a regular basis anymore, but I was curious about what went into something like that. Or in the case of iOS, someone at the company said, you build application now. And I did. And then nobody wanted it. Interesting. AMD has crappy OpenGL support? Huh. I was unaware of that. Yeah, I use projects and workspaces like to a ridiculous level. If you watch streams, for example, something that we've been working on recently on my Twitch streams is a game that allows you to drop a little parachute guy from the top of the screen and try to land on a target. So here's a target, here's a parachute, and here's some emotes. And if you follow me on Twitter, you might notice these aren't the same images as they normally are. I rewrote some history. This thing is all up. But while I'm working on this, well, sometimes I need to work on the version of this that's connected with the chatbot that I have running on Twitch. that's not stored here. That's stored in this one. And now I can be looking at the code for the Twitch bot. And then, oh, maybe I want to actually look at the source code for my override audit package for Sublime Text. It will help you manage your package overrides in Sublime Text, because someone earlier in this video may have had a question related to, I want to have a plugin that's not in the top level of a package. And you might notice that this is in the top level of a package, but none of these are, and yet these are all commands. How does this actually work? Well, actually the magic for that is this and these lines here. Though how those work require you to know more about Python. But I might pop over and say something like that, and then we can drop back over to, I was working on a game engine one time, and here's the source code available for that. And then we can go back to looking at the dropper game. And so on and so forth. Doing something like this, swapping between projects, is so ridiculously fast and easy that it's I have been known to create simple projects named delete me just because I want to swip back and forth between windows. And of course, you can also do that without a project by just creating a workspace instead. But summoning new windows, closing windows, all very easy to pull off as well. I really find that, and I've said this in several of my videos, but one of the things that I love about Sublime Text, particularly after spending so long working with IntelliJ, IDEA, and WebStorm, and Sea Lion briefly, and AppCode, which allows you to create iOS applications on Mac. Those are all versions of a particular platform that they have, which is an extremely powerful platform that has a lot of language intelligence in it, but it also has tons of features, tons of panels, and it assumes that you want to and are going to and should and must work in a very particular way. You're going to use this tool. This is how you're going to use it. It's going to be in this location. It's going to do this stuff. The best you can do is say, I want that to be on the bottom instead of on the left, or above this or below that. But if you're not used to working that way, then it can be weird and off-putting. Like I want to do work the way that I've always wanted to do it. Why is this tool getting in my way and telling me that I've been doing it wrong all this time? Sublime, on the flip side, doesn't have everything out of the box. It has a very small, lean footprint that you can expand as much as you like, and you can customize it to exactly what you want your editor to do. Nothing more, nothing less. And that makes you able to adapt it to your workflow instead of the other way around. So, like for example, I have I created a package to allow me to examine, well, that's not going to work right now because I haven't logged in a while, the contents of videos on the channel for being able to create links, which we just saw a moment ago, because that's something that I would like in my Sublime. That's not something that should be built in. That's not to say that how some applications suggest you work isn't a better way than what you're using, but the tools should never force something on you. You should, however, always sort of be on the lookout for a new way to do something, but you still, we all need to get our work done, and we don't need to spend our time fighting with tools in order to make it happen. Daniel Lima, yo, hello, welcome to the chat. How you doing this fine Tuesday evening? An evening very close to the point where it's officially going to be summer, if I remember that whole 21st thing correctly, but nevertheless, it's been rather cold and predictably rainy out here for the last little while. 3 days in the last week, I've gone out for a morning walk and gotten absolutely drenched from rains that were not supposed to be on the forecast, and it is sad. Is there any way to auto-save in fixed intervals? I am doing not too shabby. I had a rather nasty headache earlier, but Tylenol/Advil seems to have finally done the job. So hopefully I'm just as energetic and effervescent as I normally am in the streams here. There's definitely a way. Yeah. The session is saved. There's not a built-in way to do that. I'm sure there's got to be a package for some sort of auto-save type operation. It would be fairly easy to create one too, I would imagine. Automatically saves the file after every modification. Well, that's probably going a little far. But yeah, it's definitely something that you could do. To be honest, I'm kind of surprised that there's not something like that. Automatically save a backup copy every time you save or open. No, that's probably not what you want to do either. I personally am not a fan of save on focus lost, but I'm also not a fan of that standard way that some some window managers work, where the focus follows your mouse, so no matter where you point, that's where the focus goes. I'm kind of one of those old fuddy-duddies. I want to know that the reason that the file was saved to disk is because I sent it there, not because I inadvertently switched a tab or switched to another application, or a mail popped up and there was an invalid certificate and now my file is persisted to disk when I didn't necessarily want it to be. So I've never really looked into that too deeply. Pardon me. Oh. Seen Mesa's Zinc? I have not. That's interesting. I assume that includes Mac OS? Isn't Mesa a software GL implementation? But I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be software if it can redirect hardware calls from one API to another, or library calls to the hardware as a little sort of a command driver proxy kind of thing. Showing my ignorance, I believe you've probably forgotten more about GL than I've ever actually known. Hello, Mike. Welcome to the stream. It's going well. How are things going for you? We were just discussing a couple of things. Mesa's Zinc that could theoretically run OpenGL on top of Vulkan on any platform, which would be nice because as Ben says, there's progress in getting it to run on top of Molten VK, which would allow it to be Metal, which is the thing that would make Apple happier, or Apple users happier. Also, someone was asking about the ability to automatically save a file after, like autosave every 5 minutes instead of autosave on focus lost. I would have thought that there would be a package for something like that. But for some reason, there's not. Minify on save, re-dent on save, delayed save all. There are a lot of packages with save in the name, I'll give it that. Oh, that's right. Yes, I can't remember if I congratulated you on that or not, but good times. Have you mentioned, or can you mention what your new job actually entails? It's sort of fun that you're the second week in and still waiting for work to start. Pardon me. Someone asked in a recent Twitch stream what to expect as a new hire at a company just out of college, and they were afraid that they were going to be slammed and overwhelmed, and with the idea that someone was going to give them some large complicated task that they weren't going to be able to fulfill, and then everybody would consider them a failure and they would fire them, and that would be the end of that. And the advice in the channel was, welcome to a wonderful career of filled with imposter syndrome, but don't worry, companies tend to ease you, into stuff. It's not necessarily a trial by fire unless it's not a particularly good company. But But if you're into the second week and still waiting for things to start, that's definitely some low-key action. Is Monokai disabled on the new version? No, it's not. It's just not the default. The new default preference, if we were to look at the settings, the default color scheme is Mariana now, but you can very easily say UI, select color scheme, and pick Monokai, and it'll put you back to the default that you had before. Over here in the settings window, oh, my caps lock is turned on, pardon me. You can see it set the color scheme. This color scheme is still here, it's just not what the default is anymore. We probably don't want that. I tend to use the Mariana color scheme as my color scheme, although I have made some slight tweaks to it. For example, I've made the background just slightly darker than it was before. Consulting, right. Yeah, I never considered that sort of thing. I probably should. The non-kernel part of the Linux GPU stack. Okay, there you go. My whole history of using Mesa as a whole stems to a point before we had any sort of decent accelerated graphics cards in the systems. And I should point out that based on my incredibly advanced age, I remember when 3D acceleration was a new and exciting topic that didn't have GL, and there wasn't an NVIDIA, and there were like Diamond Viper cards and the like. Back in those days, if you didn't have the right kind of card, then you might be using Mesa to get hardware acceleration support for GL. Not directly at that point because GL wouldn't have existed. But in that case, it turns out that a fully software GL stack, when everything that uses GL is expecting to dispatch stuff to hardware for speed, isn't the greatest experience in the world. But we've pretty much been using NVIDIA cards for like the last 15 plus years. Yeah, Sublime Text 4 got to get that license. Glad I could help you there, Aki Kumar. Now should point out that there will be a couple of changes to how things look in Monokai, which is sort of something that is not technically unsolvable. But for example, if I did this, if I created a scratch buffer for CSS and said there was a body tag and the font size was 26 pixels like this. Okay, well, we don't need to save that. And then I changed the color scheme back to Mariana. Whoops, not Mariana. Fool. Monokai. Pardon me. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to run Sublime Text 3, which also I have currently set to that, but I can not type for one thing, but I could set this to Monokai and then say scratch buffer prompt for syntax CSS, paste it in. You'll note that the difference between these two things here, the body is still green, the font size is still blue, the number is still 12, but now the PX is red instead of the blue color that it was over there. And the reason for that is over here, this is keyword other unit. And over here, this is constant numeric. So basically, the moral of the story is, of all the things that are enhanced in Sublime Text 4, the syntax definitions that it ships with have been greatly enhanced as well and provide more detailed syntax highlighting information. Some of that made some slight tweaks to things. So if you wanted to, you could modify this to be the same color as it used to be if that really bothers you. I have a video on the channel that covers that very thing, as a matter of fact. But apart from that, everything should still work exactly the way as it did before. You could even get the tabs to look like this little angle in Sublime Text 4 if you like as well. But I'm a fan of the new version of that. Let us switch that back to that before things get a little weird on me. We'll go back to Mariana there as well. I gotta say, I wasn't really a fan of. At one point in the past, I used the material theme for Sublime, and it had basically all of the tabs were kind of like this, but they didn't have this hover effect. They didn't have defined edges, even the active one. It was just, the names of some stuff. And I found it very hard to track what I was actually doing using that. But Will implemented this in a fantastic way, and it's now my new favorite view of tabs. Yeah, that's sort of like I think we've covered that, or talked about that rather, in like some streams recently. Like, I have distinct memories of wanting to create a Final Fantasy type game, and I don't mean Final Fantasy VII. I mean like the original Final Fantasy for the Nintendo, that little pixelated top-down jobby. And in order to be able to render a square of stuff on the screen and have the guy walk around fast enough, I had to resort to assembly language, because there was just no way with pure C code to display pixels to the screen when some of them needed to be transparent and some of them not, in any sort of reasonably fast way. And fast forward to now, you could write your own scripting language in JavaScript and have your scripting language be interpreted by JavaScript, which is itself, interpreted / JIT compiled, and it's still 5,000 to 10,000 times faster than, stuff from even a couple of years ago. Though the way technology has gone is like ridiculous, causing old fuddy-duddies like me to be worried that people aren't as focused on making good software now, because they can make mediocre software quickly instead of really good, solid, fast software and take a little bit more time, because the hardware is a little bit more forgiving in that regard. But, like I say, I am known to be a grumpy old man from time to time. So, but now let's see. There was something. Yeah, I was looking at this earlier and lamenting how there's a part of the YouTube studio that shows you comments that you haven't replied to yet, or that you haven't responded to yet. But for some reason, not all comments actually end up in there, which is weird. So it's really hard to track comments. If I get a notification for them, I have to respond to them right away, or I might potentially lose track of them, and that's not always possible. So if you happen to be watching this and you ask a question and it takes me a little while to come up with an answer, I apologize, but YouTube doesn't make that necessarily easy. In fact, sometimes I notice that there are some things that appear in the comment list that don't actually appear in my notification feed for reasons I don't understand. Someone said, can I use Python, Java stuff, Ruby on Rails, MySQL? And the answer to that question is yes. I don't know that that's necessarily the most well-formed question. Can you do these things in Sublime Text? Yes, you absolutely can do those things in Sublime Text. The other thing that I wanted to talk about relates to the topic of this week's video, which was something we've talked about at some point in a stream in the past, but something I want to do is revisit some of the older videos on the channel and sort of freshen them up a little bit, because some of those original videos are long and slow and plodding and boring, and that's not really the vibe of that I want to have for the channel. It was okay for when I was just expecting those to be videos that I was going to link to a forum post, because I didn't think anybody would, really want to subscribe and view the channel. But in the last couple of years, that's really taken off. I'm really enjoying creating videos for you guys watching and everybody that, isn't here right now. So I want to visit some of those older videos. But concerns there are people thinking that I'm just re-mining old content, which is not at all the case. And hopefully when you see the refreshed versions of them, it's clear why it was that I was trying to do something like that. Have I heard of org mode? People talk about it all the time, but I've never used it myself. Yeah, it definitely seemed to be something Emacs related. I'm pretty sure there's a version, some sort of version of it for package control as well. Or there are people working on it. Keeping notes, maintaining to-do lists. Yeah. A lot of people, well, is that actually, oh, maybe I should actually click on the thing and not the people. Yeah, I used simple notes for this when I was keeping notes like this. So I've never particularly used this, but there's a lot of people that are talking about it. It seems like a pretty cool thing. It turns out that I don't tend to keep to-do lists in a manner that, you know, helps for this. I did for a while with plain notes, but after plain tasks, pardon me. I have plain notes and plain tasks, and I want to say plain tasks has the ability to have checkboxes that you can check off and such. I've never really used org mode in any meaningful way, though. Can you give an example of one may want to use file regex or line regex? I really don't get what they're for. Okay, well, we can try something like that. It goes a little something like this. If I did sample.c, for example, and I had this C code, and there wasn't a semicolon here. We didn't do this outside of Sublime for simplistic purposes here. But if I said gcc -c sample.c, this is a command that might be executed. When this triggers a problem, we get an error message that says in the file sample.c on line 8, in column 13, there was an error, and the error was I expected there to be a semicolon before this. This gives you the information on where the file the error is in, the line it's on, the column that it's in, and the actual error message all in one shot. If we'd had a sample.py, which apparently I do because I did something with a video recently. Let's say that I didn't have, this extra thing at the back here, and I said python sample.py. This one says in the file sample.py on line 13, and then on the next line there's some more text, and then there's some more text, and then way down here is where the actual error is, and the actual error is invalid syntax. So the magic, such as it is, of using file regex and line regex is that they're used by build systems, and we can actually look at these here. If we'd use view package file for C++ single file, for example, C would be the exact same way. It has just a file regex and nothing else. What the file regex does is says for all of the output that appears in the build output panel, which, you know, for our example would be this stuff up here, scan it one at a time to find any lines that match this regular expression. And if they do, then they are error messages that we want to navigate to. And when you match this, the very first capture group in the regular expression is going to be the name of the file. Then there's going to be the line that the error was found, if there is one. Then the column where the error is found, if there is one. And then the message, if there is one. So because GCC and the tools of its like generate error messages in this quote-unquote standard way of this file, this line, this column, this problem, you would use just file regex for that, because one regular expression is all it takes to find all of the information: the file, the line, the column, and the message. The caveat being that they have to appear in this exact order. For things that don't work that way, and I think maybe Java might be a better example of that. I'm not entirely sure. No, I guess perhaps not. Why you would use a line regex? Let's see, is there one in the Python build? I don't even remember, to be perfectly honest, because I don't use... it doesn't have one either. The idea of using a line regex and a file regex is sometimes the location of the error and the error message are in a different place than, or a different line rather than the actual thing here. Let's look at file regex, like so. We can actually look at the documentation for it. A regular expression to run on the build output to match file information. So you get these captures in a particular order. First the file, then the line, then the column, then the message. And remember, it always has to match on exactly one line. If your error message is split over multiple lines, then it's hard to find the actual information because the regex is never going to match it. No matter how much you add things into the regular expression here that says, and then match a new line and go forward, doesn't matter because internally Sublime is getting one line and matching it against that one line and only that one line. If you also include line regex, and file regex is something that you would use on its own, for line regex you would use both of them. If both of them are in there, then Sublime says, let's match the line regex first and find out what things match this regular expression. And when they match, that's where it gets the line number, the column, and the error message in that order. And then after it's found a line that matches this, it looks backwards through the build output to see if there's something that matches file regex, and then it matches that one too. Now you notice there's some overlap here. Line, column, error, line, column, error, or message in this case. What's missing in this one is file name. So if the file where the error is located is in a different place than the location of the error inside of that file, then you would use line regex to find the error location and then file regex to find the file. And if both of these are specified, you can put the captures in both of them, and then, you know, if this one has an error message and this one doesn't, they just sort of meld together. I don't know of any examples offhand that do something like that, but I believe that there is some work going on, or it was talked about, something that should happen is that the way the error navigation works shouldn't rely on a regular expression, because more and more tools don't necessarily follow a format that either of these two things will actually match. Like if your tool says on line 6, column 5 of this file name, this thing happened, or this thing happened on line 6, column 5 of this file name, basically not this top-down order, then the file regex isn't going to work for you because you can't match the things in the order that you need them to. So you can't even navigate errors in a file like that without using something external to try to rewrite the content. I believe there was Will talked at some point about making that be syntax based instead in some fashion. So you would build a build system and give it a syntax definition that allows it to definitely determine exactly what the errors are no matter what, using the powers of the syntax highlighting, and then this would get a lot better. Is there a way to show the error message for the Python build system? Yeah, that is a good question. As I was doing that example, I was thinking like, it's finding the file and it's finding the line, I think. And I should point this out. The way that this works is by examining the output that is dumped out to the build output panel here, right? So there's a couple of things that you can do. One is your build system could send its output through some shell script or batch file, or you could actually run a batch file that runs something and then manipulates it in some fashion so that when the tool generates an error message, it's rewritten to be something that you could match. The other thing that you can do is have your own custom version of the exec command that will do that for you on the fly. And that's actually something I worked on in the past for the LinkPad package that Keith Hall is working on, although we kind of stalled out on that one because I stopped using Sublime, or sorry, I stopped using LinkPad when I got pulled off of a C# project at work. And the answer to the question, what am I using to create Scratch files? This little plugin right here. It's not in package control. It's just a simple plugin file and a command file. I say it's not in package control. It's not in package control yet. One of the video plans, and I don't know where it is on the schedule, is a video for the Plugin 101 video series that's going to cover how you get your package into package control if you happen to have created one yourself. How you do something like that, like getting your plugin working initially, what to look for, because when you add a package to package control, it's going to be manually verified by somebody. So what are the things you should look for to make sure that it's not going to get kicked back to you? How you might name your package, make sure that there's not an existing one. The process of actually creating the pull request that gets you in and waiting. And when we do that video, we're going to do it for reals by turning this little plugin here into an actual package. We need to do a little bit more work on it. It could, for example, have more Sublime Text 4 related powers in it than it does right now. It actually currently has the power to work with Sublime Text 3 and then really old versions of Sublime Text that didn't have some the command palette functionality that the newer builds have. So when that happens, this will actually be a package, and you'll get to see exactly the process of how that works. We haven't gotten to that part yet, though. Glad I could help, Job. I know that file regex thing, I think, went a little bit off the rails there as I was discussing it, but yeah, basically, it really does rely on, first of all, you need to know how regular expressions work. And it's complicated-ish by the fact that this regular expression in your build system, it has to be a valid JSON string. So there can be a lot more quoting in there than you might expect. Like, for example, the actual regular expression that this is looking for Python is the name of a file wrapped in double quotes, right? When it generates the error message, it puts the file name inside of double quotes like that. That's what this is looking for, but it's a slash double quote, because if this was just a double quote, this would be invalid JSON. So you have to use slash that. And if you want to have a slash in here, then you have to put 2 of them. And if you need 2 slashes, then you need 4 of them, and then things get out of control rather quickly. All the more reason for something like this to be syntax-based and not necessarily regular expression-based. Although in the weird sense, syntaxes are regular expression-based, but they have a little bit more power than this. I wonder. Yeah, we'll create a window for that. The thought occurs. I wonder if we had some sort of help file, say this one. No, I guess there needs to be a problem in said file. Uh-oh, I may have made the thing particularly unhappy with that one. This is also an example of using that same operation, and I bet you this is using a combination of file regex and line regex. If you follow that link, that will send you to the place where you can get the plugin file and a command file that you can use to add it to the command palette. And if you're unfamiliar how to apply a plugin, this video covers the details on how to do that as well. Let's look very quickly at this thing, because this also has an example, I believe, since we were talking about this. No, that's the actual syntax. That's less interesting. Pardon me. That's kind of interesting, though. I can't remember how my own package works. That's kind of funky. Well, actually, I guess the easiest thing to do is look for file regex. Here we go. File regex and line regex. Here's an example of using these two things side by side. Whoops. Well, maybe I should push the correct key. Well, maybe I should put the correct file down there too. Huh? How about that there, Jack? The output of this linter is something that could be considered part of a build system. This is actually a build command. It just happens to generate its output into a file. You can also get it to generate into a tab. That's neither here nor there. But notice that this has information on where the file is, and then the next line has the line and column and the actual message for these. And you can actually double click this and it'll take you exactly to the error, which is exactly how build systems work, right? And that works by doing this. We'll just dump this down here. Like so, it sets the setting file regex to this and line regex to this. Ignore the result part. That's the stuff that happens behind the scenes outside of your build system. When these two things are in place here, this tells Sublime that it should look first for line regex and find something that matches what is the start of the line, some short number of characters, followed by an @ sign, followed by a number that it captures as the line, and then another one that is the column, and then another one that is the message, which you might notice is this. And once it finds that, it knows that it needs to also apply file regex. So it starts at this line and moves backwards through until it finds the very first line it can find that matches file regex, which in this case is any line that starts with some text followed by a colon, which is this one. So given these two things together, it knows that this file at this line at this location is this error message, and thus it allows you to navigate there. And you may or may not be coming across, if you look in the status bar area there, but it says link references, unknown topic, units, and coordinate. That's information that it pulled out of this thing here. This is exactly how build navigations work. And hello, Ashwin. How are you doing this fine morning? Yeah. I don't think I fixed that in a way that I probably could have. There we go. And then when I fix that problem, there's no more warnings and everything is cool again. We've just been discussing build systems and file regex and line regex in them, because it can be one of those things that kind of is confusing to people. It's definitely confused someone in the forum recently whose name escapes me at the moment, but he had a build system for multiple different kinds of compilers and multiple different types of options compiling things, all in variants, and he was trying to use a single file regex, but that doesn't work because GCC generates output in a different format than Clang generates output, for example. So trying to have one file regex and one line regex to match the errors, you end up with weird problems. My day has been not too bad, all things being equal. I had a really awful headache earlier, but medication kicked in. I was actually afraid that I might have to cancel the stream, but I'm feeling pretty good for right now. Although we may end round about at the 10 o'clock mark, at the 2-hour mark here, instead of going a little bit longer, just because I don't want to force anything. What with the brightness of the lights sometimes tends not to help. But apart from that, things have been going rather well, I think. And since you also follow Twitch streams as well, I should point out that the final version-ish of the drop game is now up on the related GitHub. I did a little bit of history rewriting in it, so if anybody has already cloned it, my apologies, but you're going to be real unhappy if you fetch stuff down. I would recommend getting a new clone. It's not something that I want to do really, but I had some files in the repository that I wanted to not be in the repository going forward, and the only way to do that was to rewrite the entire history to make sure that they were never there to begin with. So it was one of those unfortunate situations. Yeah, I was mentioning that earlier. I don't know if is there an actual issue for that? I remember it is. Yeah, it's in oh, actually, there may or may not actually be, this command might work here as well. If it does, if the bot eventually replies, it would be in the repository stream dropper. And we were talking about that. I think, I know Will mentioned it, but I don't know if there's an issue tracking it or if that's one of those things that has been on the roadmap. Interesting. Here's a funny thing. Maybe there's not a chat bot that's associated with that. Sorry. Let's close some stuff up here. No, let's do this. Tell me if I'm crazy here. If I run this, well, sorry, if I set the build system to something appropriate, set it to automatic, for example. When I run this with, say, C single file, I end up with, a problem. There's an error. There should be something there. And is that entirely unexpected? No, it's not. And incidentally, in Sublime Text 4, we get these error annotations instead of those balloons that go underneath. You can close those if you like, but life is good. Now, if we came to the console here, and we were to clear out said console and say, hey, sublime.log result regex, like this, and build this, how come the same thing pops out 3 times? Because it doesn't seem like it should pop out 3 times. Yes, indeed. My readmes and my comments are legendary. Love it or hate it, I challenge you to not understand what's going on in my code or why I make commits in repositories. For that matter, because generally speaking, all the commits in Git repositories that I make also have reasons why the commits were actually made, the logic that was intended, and the like. There was something else here. I do my best. I mean, anything that I write professionally tends to only have comments and not have documentation because no one will give me time to write documentation. But as I am very fond of saying, when 50% of your job is to write the code and the other 50% of your job is to support the code, then it behooves you to write comments in your code that explains the logic of what you thought it was supposed to do at the time that you wrote it. Because if there's a bug later on, you can compare what you thought it was supposed to do with what it's actually doing, which might give you a hint to where the bug is. Because if you examine code that you don't necessarily know what the intention was, then you can look at it and say, yeah, this does a thing. Is it the thing that you expected it to do? Who knows? If there was comments there, you would totally know. Also, if you need to figure out, if you don't remember why something happened, the comments will remind you. More importantly, if half of your time is spent on doing that, then you look like some sort of genius, and or you get more time to go make a fresh cup of tea. If you tell someone, I'll look into your problem for you and see, it'll, half of my job is related to supporting this, so I'll look into that, and then you just look at the code and go, oh, I thought this was going to do this, but clearly I should have used a 1 instead of a 0 here. You flip that, you've just saved yourself tons of time. Now you have time to go make extra coffee and people won't harass you. The other problem of that, what you have to be careful of, is that if you change the code, make sure you update the comment, because if things get out of sync, you're going to make yourself unhappy. But we also found that when new people come into a code base, they don't have the insight that you have into why something does something a certain way. And you might think, oh, maybe I should do this other way. And it turns out, no, you shouldn't do it some other way because there's a very specific reason we're doing it this way. And if you have a comment there, then they would know that sort of thing. And yeah, I am not a fan of clever code, the code that, is nice and small and terse and, check it out. My code golf has allowed me to implement this sophisticated algorithm with only 2 lines of code. That's great. Now there's a bug in it. Good luck finding it. That as well, yeah. It's sort of a 50-50 thing on that, because on the project, at work that we've been working on for the 20 years, we are so familiar with the code base at this point, it being the main thing that we've been working on, that comments are kind of passe for a lot of things. If there was a specific problem that we were having, I could probably narrow in on the exact file just by knowing what the problem is through all of the files in the whole thing. I might not know exactly where in the file, but I probably have a pretty good idea. But even so, having those comments in there really helps, because there are some areas of the code that are like hotspots that are constantly being updated, and others that are only looked at very infrequently. So you do sort of get a little bit of the C++ Sublime syntax. You can use view package file and say C++ syntax and hit the enter key, and that'll load that up for you. Just like so. It is a rather complicated, one of the more complicated syntaxes. Note also that when you do this, you can't type in here. That's on purpose. If you use my super fantastic override audit package, then you could override this resource and modify it with impunity if you wanted to. Or just view it on GitHub. Yeah. For something like that, I would say this. Oh, I don't even know if I have a link to that. I might. Let's see. The C++ package can be found here. And then here's the URL for that. This is also from Override Audit. It's got all sorts of cool things. Cylon Scion, hello, the night is going well. You want to know its file path? Well, then you want to view package file, C++ syntax, and then you can right click and choose copy file path. And then if you had another file, this is the theoretical location where it would be stored if it was on a place on disk where you can modify it, but it's not. So if you try to look there, you won't find it, which is why you should use view package file. But if you throw all of this part off so that it just starts with packages, then you know that it's in the C++ package and it's named C++.sublime syntax. Indeed, all of the packages that ship with Sublime except the default package are in that repository there. Particularly in this repository. I believe so, yeah. If I remember history correctly, all of these packages were originally from TextMate way back in the day. As I understand it, the reason why Sublime supports things like TM language and TM theme and the like was because during its development, John needed to have syntax definitions and color schemes and such. And those files were freely available to use. And by supporting them, you sort of jumpstart your community for the whole operation, right? You just jump from, you don't have to create all of those complicated syntaxes yourself. And then, of course, they are open source here because I believe they were open source to begin with, which is why Sublime could use them even though they originally came from TextMate, which means that the community along with the Sublime Text developers, can augment and enhance them. And as a matter of fact, you may often see items in the changelog for things that say, well, for example, there's, oh, good gravy, that's a little bright. If you were to look in the change log for the latest version, you might notice that out-of-the-box TypeScript support for TypeScript, JSX, and TSX thanks to Thomas Smith, and Erlang with thanks to Deathax. These are people from the Sublime Text community that work on putting these packages together. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure they do. For example, anything that uses line regex specifically, there might not be. Yeah. I am using a dark theme, yeah, but it doesn't know that it's a dark theme. I have issues. In particular, what's that thing? I can't remember. This one. Sublime thinks that I am in the light color scheme. And the reason that it thinks that is because the window manager that I use, XFCE, doesn't correctly set the appropriate theme variables for Sublime to be able to detect that it is a dark theme. So I don't want it to be either light or dark depending on what Sublime figures. I always want it to be dark, which is why I have it set that way. But anything that relies on the auto detection, like the changelog, detects as being light. Oh yeah, you pulled it up. I knew it had UI in the name. For a second there, I forgot how to actually pull it out. Now that Sublime Text 4 is out, what's your favorite new feature? You know, that's kind of tricky. I have found myself using more this sort of action for being able to have multiple files open, particularly earlier today. But I think the thing that I probably like most is the new stuff in the autocomplete for the stuff that we can, the kind information here, and also how the same thing is possible inside of the command palette as well, and in the quick panel and in list input items, to be able to have sort of more UI stuff here. As boring as that seems, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But keep in mind that I have been using Sublime 4 since the very first builds were made available back in 2019. So, I've liked all of the features that have come across. I probably just sort of had a new rolling favorite go along over time. I guess I would probably give high likes to the way that the syntax highlighting now has the ability to non-deterministically, go back and say, oh, now that I've seen this token, I realize that I made a mistake 3 lines back. Go back there. This thing is actually something different than I thought it was. Yeah. Oh, thank you for stopping by, Job. And if you didn't already know, if you're not already there, I also stream on Twitch on Wednesdays and Fridays. Same time slot. We just sort of do, coding stuff. Still using Sublime Text though, and you can still ask questions there as well. Loving the autocompletion too. I've noticed that there seems to be a rising movement for people that are a little unhappy about how insert best completion is gone now. That's not something that I ever really got much use out of, so I can commiserate that something that they use is no longer there, but that's not something that directly affects me though. Close every tab except for the current one. Oh, well, let's see. Tab, context, menu. Which one of these is that one? Close others by index. So it's definitely possible with a plugin. This is the command to do it. You just need to tell it what file group you're in and what index of the file you want to keep, and every other file would close. I think Ashwin has created something like that previously for somebody on the forum. If I had to, seems very familiar. If not, then something that does the same sort of thing. But yeah, with the simple plugin, you can do that, which is like the beauty of Sublime. It can't be all things to all people out of the box, but we do have the tools necessary to make it be our own thing. And by the way, Anonymous, I love that. That is an awesome handle. Oh. Yeah, that's this one here. You can do it this way. You can close other tabs. We don't want to save that one. We don't want to save that one. That is this command here, close others by index. The problem is that you have to tell it what file group you're in, i.e. in this case it was 0 because 0, 1, and the index of the file, which now is 1, in order for it to know which one to get. So you can't do it directly by a key binding without a plugin. Now, so for example, let's see. Let's look at the documentation, why don't we? You can get the active group by asking the window, what's the active group? And you can ask for the active view, or you probably want active sheet, all else being equal, or active sheet in group to tell you the appropriate thing. And sheets in group. So let's see. Let's do a thing. Let's create a new plugin. And this would probably be, let's see, close others shim command. You wouldn't want that to be a text command. You'd want that to be a window command, because this is going to affect a window as a whole, you figure, for the current file. Could be a text command too. Whoops. So the command that we want to execute is this one, close others by index. Let's copy that over into the little file here. That's, oh shoot. That's interesting. There may be a slight bug in the comment joy. Do we need to know about the caption? No, we don't. But this is the thing that we're actually trying to execute. So what we need to know is the group that the current file is in, right? So we just looked that up. Window.activeGroup would tell you something like that, right? Like so. Returns the index of the currently selected group. Groups being these panes of files. There's one here and there's one behind the chat that you can't see. So that would be window.activeGroup. So, right, group is equal to self.window.activeGroup, like so. And the other thing we need to know is the index of the file. And how do we get that? Well, we can get the sheet in active sheet in a particular group. We're using sheets instead of views because I've been bitten by that one too many times. Mention that right out of the way. So we can do two things here. We want this one. This is information that we want to have, and we'll cover why in just a moment. And the other thing we want is sheets in group as well, like so. Because sheets in group, oops, is going to, is that not in the, did I spell it wrong? Oh, sorry, need to specify the group. Right, so the active group 0, these are the sheets that are in this group. There are 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It is, right? You could say window.active sheet in group 0. That tells you that one. But you need to, figure what we need to know is not this. We need to know its position in sheets in group. So you need to know both of these things in order to pull this off. So we would say self.window.sheets in group, and the group is group. That's going to give us a list of things. Can we get the actual index with one thing now? And now that I'm saying that, am I remembering this incorrectly? And or what's the magic for Python telling you the item of a thing in a group? Because I know I've done this before, but now I'm returns to group. Yeah. Get view index. Get sheet index is what I want here. Get sheet index. Pardon me, I may have grabbed the wrong item there. Returns the group and index within the group of the sheet. Hey, that's handy. I think this might be even easier than I thought it was. Yeah, right? I don't know what, well, I mean, like I say, I don't know why anybody would want to do something like that, but does that really matter? Returns the group and index within the group of the sheet. So we could say group comma index is equal to self.window.get sheet index for self.window.active sheet. Oh, really? There's no act. No, that maybe should work. Yeah, that'll return the thing. That should give us information that we're interested in. Let's copy it down here and we can see. We take this part out. 0, 1, 2, 3 in group 0. And that's exactly the information we want for something like this. So all you need is that, and then you say self.window.run command. The command is close others by index, and then the arguments that you give it are the group, which is the group, and the index, which is the index. And that's it, right? So in theory, we bind this to a key, it should close every tab but the current one. So all we can do is bind this to a key. So we go view package file, user Linux keys. Whoops. Is this the one from the user package? Yep, yes it is. Okay. I usually use super plus T for this sort of thing. And if we were to just double check that I don't have something funky in here by running the echo command, then that's going to work. So we just need to put this command in that we created, close others shim, like this. That's the key binding. That's the command. Then we push this key and push this, and then that's the only tab that's left. So is it possible to do something like this? Yes. Yes, it is. And if I was thinking a little bit more clearly, wouldn't have gone down the slight rabbit hole of looking for the wrong stuff before remembering the actual thing that I was looking for. So you could very easily have a command to do that very thing, should you like it. It should work for it no matter where it is. Hit the key, all the other files go away. Yeah, once you start using it, it really, you can select multiple tabs. It doesn't display both of them though. Just for moving them around, I guess. You ever run into the situation where you're typing a comment somewhere and you want to Control D to select the current word so that you can wrap it in quotes, but you can't because the editor doesn't do that sort of thing? I hate when that happens. Pardon me. The multi-select thing is starting to be that way for other stuff too. Oh, interesting. Who would close a browser tab? Surely you just keep accumulating them forever and ever until they're so tiny all you can see is the little icon and you can't actually make out any of the text, right? As if all of them are pinned even though they're not. No, just me. I'm the only one that does that? Okay. We'll change this to close other tabs. A simple shim command that wraps the built-in close others by index command. Garbage collects tabs. You know that thing that happens sometimes in a Chrome tab where it says "aw snap" because the process that's underpinning that one tab crashes. That happens routinely with Jenkins builds on our CI server, which makes it very tricky. I tend to just leave everything running for forever, including Sublime, except for when I restart it to point out various things. Is Control-Alt-Shift-W bound to anything by default? No. All right. So in that case, Control-Alt-Shift-W. Boop. I haven't seen the multi-select that Sublime has. Oh, where it shows both? Yeah. I don't remember ever seeing that in anything but Sublime myself. But until Sublime started doing it, I never really would have thought of doing it either, for that matter. Do. Just throwing some stuff into a gist here. That's going to be a space dented 4 file, like so. Does that need to be a secret? I don't think that needs to be a secret. That can be a public gist. Let's publicize that bad boy. Should anybody want to play with this particular key binding or plugin, here is the code for that sort of thing. Remember that Tools Developer new plugin is the easiest way to create a plugin. Copy the text out of there, paste it in here, save this. It'll automatically go to your user package, and you'll be good to go. Sublime Text was the first place I saw multi-cursor and fuzzy search. Yeah, I think that I heard of multi-editing support first in IntelliJ or something from that line, but I think IntelliJ. I seem to recall they were really happy about how this much asked for thing was now in, but it never explained what it was, how to use it, or why anybody would want to. So I never really thought much of it until I came to Sublime, and it was available there. And just today I saved myself probably an hour's worth of tinkering with the ability to do something like this and copy 4 things and then go to another file and paste those things in to replace some boilerplate code, which was a lot faster than that because I was using that, the ability to do this. So you can snag multiple things at once, copy them, go to the other place, do the exact same thing, and plunk them all out. It is such an incredible time saver. I'm not entirely sure how I lived without it, and I curse the people from IntelliJ for not making it more obvious in a blog post at some point why I shouldn't be using this thing to edit all of my code. Of course, I spent a lot of my time in IntelliJ trying to figure out how to get its auto code formatter to make my code look like what I wanted it to look like, and was never able to accomplish that. So, there's only so much you can do. I wonder. I'm going to try something here. We'll see if it works. Oh, not that key. Pardon me. I may have mentioned at some point, I can't remember if I did or not. Hang on a second here. We developed a simple plugin to allow you to close all files but the current one. Whoops. With a single key press. At the request of a chat user. You can find that here. Yeah, cool. In theory, that's now linked into the description of the video as well. You may have to refresh the page to be able to see it there. You know how in this day and age of Zoom meetings everywhere, I've had a few instances where I've been helping other developers debug their code remotely, so they would go on Zoom and screen share. And I might say something like, "Oh, I think you probably want to have line 17, 2 lines down from where it is." And I would do that by this, or cut and paste, or what, like. They were actually doing things like, oh, okay. And just like over and over and over for edits. And every time it happened, my soul kind of died a little bit inside. And my mouse would hover ever closer to that little button at the top of the Zoom window where you request keyboard control. Because you're not using Sublime, you're using something else. But I could definitely be making these changes a lot faster. Yeah, I know, right? That is such a handy thing. And I may have mentioned, something similar to this. Right now, my mouse has multiple Bluetooth channels, so now it's actually controlling the Windows computer on the left. I have to do the thing where I select all with the mouse and copy. When I do, stuff appears over here, which is interesting, and that's because I have command logging turned on, but the global clipboard has been updated, and this is some stuff from that computer that this package that I'm using here copied over. We should probably turn off command logging because that gets irritating real fast. But this is an example of something that I needed to do. This is copy paste from a CSV file that someone created, or not an Excel spreadsheet, and I needed to turn this into something. So you might have like this, and there's like 20 of them. So I could manually edit all of these things, or I could say, we'll just copy those 7 over to here like this. And that's that part done. And then, you know, this part for some of these was a little bit more problematic. We'll just go ahead and copy all of those. Now it's easy to do this stuff over here. That's most of the stuff. All of these are probably going to be strings. The dates are going to be dates. Texts are going to be strings. That one was probably supposed to be a string as well. And there, done. Only, you know, it wasn't 7, it was 41. But actually there were like 3 of them that I did. And being able to have multi-cursors and multi-character copy paste and stuff like that is makes life so much easier for so many editing tasks. Yeah, that's does Visual Studio Code have the multi-cursor selections and such? I would assume that's something that they also have. I don't know everybody but me and one other person at the company uses Visual Studio. I don't know that any of them know that, not that I've ever seen. And this is going to be one of those things where you want to get out the pitchforks and the like. But one of the things that often happens, if we do a little bit of this, we can just close all files but this one. I have a key binding for that now, theoretically. That makes that life a little bit easier. We'll go ahead and we'll keep that file. We'll keep that file. But there's this structure over here named data, and then it has, a place where input files would be, and a place where they go when they're archived and the like. And every time I'm working with one of the other developers, this is a tool where when you run it, it starts a process listening and then watches for files, and it'll be like, okay, let's test if that worked. And the person will come over to the thing and right click and do cut, and then go, okay, or sorry, from the archive, like, okay, that's an archive, that's a fetch, there's like 20 files in here, find the right one, right click, cut. Then we got to go back up here and scroll down and find this and then paste, and then it goes. And I do not know how anybody can work that way, moving files around. Surely you can drag and drop in there, right? I don't necessarily wouldn't do that either, but it really seems like it would be a lot easier to just do that way. Let's go ahead and click that like so. Yeah. Did you see the plugin I created for somebody in the forum where if there's multiple cursors, the cursor options are changed? So now they're blinking to let you know that there's multiples, but when there's only one, there's not. Ooh, Bin Yu subscribed to the channel. Thank you so much for the subscription. That sort of thing doesn't happen very regularly on the channel. Oh my goodness, another one. I cannot read that writing. That is so tiny on this little preview screen. I don't have a way to say it. But thank you so much for the subscriptions. Those mean a lot to the channel. I know I say this in videos all the time, but your support of the channel is what keeps the channel going and videos coming to the channel. Oh, I'm clicking on the wrong thing here. That is going to blind a guy. Built-in Vim. Do you use Neo Vintagious or the like inside of Sublime? I am on record as saying that while I know how to use Vim/VI, and it was my main editor for 20 years, I try to keep Vim things in Vim and not Vim things in not Vim, because my brain very quickly gets confused. And I don't use Vim enough at this point to want to keep working that way. Pardon me. That said, I think that I probably don't take advantage of key bindings of various sorts in Vim in a way that other people do. Just a guess, because I find it just as intuitive to select stuff with the mouse or on occasion do mark stuff. Not nearly enough, like in Vim, I kind of remember, like single quote A, go to somewhere, Y, single quote A to yank to mark or whatever. It's one of those things that my fingers will do when I try to do it, but I can't actively think of the way to do it. I've never really gotten into the habit of doing stuff like that in Sublime or in any other editor, but I never seem to really miss it either. I guess what I might miss is the idea of yanking the next 4 lines instead of having to do something like that. Or that. Yeah, most of my experience with Vintage is in reminding people that if you add the ignored packages setting to your user settings and you don't also add Vintage, you're going to add that mode to your editor and you're going to get rather unhappy about the whole situation if you're unfamiliar with Vim. Oh, let's just see here. Alrighty. I think we are more or less at the limit, or at the time that where we would normally end a stream, and I think we shall in fact do that very thing. So normally we might go a little bit longer, and we've been having an awesome chat here, but I did have a rather awful headache earlier, and it took a while to go away. So I want to get out of the bright lights and into a nice cozy bed and hopefully sleep off whatever it is that's making my brains unhappy, unless it's work-related stuff. Thank you, everybody who showed up tonight. Well, we answered a lot of questions, hopefully in that most helpful way. And love chatting with you guys and answering your Sublime Text questions. We will be live tomorrow on Twitch as well at the exact same time over at twitch.tv/odatnerd. There's probably a link down in the description of this video unless I'm terrible and copy pasted it from the wrong location, which I realized I had been doing for quite some time for some other things. Hopefully that's fixed now. And if you want to hang out there, we go much longer on Twitch streams, particularly on Friday, where we go into the wee hours, just working on coding tasks in Sublime. A great opportunity to see Sublime in the real world, as it were, and not necessarily on a channel where we're working on how to do more stuff with it. So yeah, thank you so much for everybody that showed up. We will see you in next week's stream right here at 8 o'clock Pacific next Tuesday. Everything's all scheduled and ready to go. Or on Twitch. And until then, remember to please have a sublime day. Stupid finger. Never works. Never.